Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org and this show in particular. Correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here tonight with not one, not two, but three guests, Dana Hoey, Allison Chawla, and Michael Slaby. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's
So
great.
excited.
Hi. If you don't mind, I just want to read a little something about each of you to start this off. Dana Hoey is an American photographer born in San Francisco, based in Hudson Valley, New York. She received a BA in philosophy from Wesleyan University and an MFA in photography from the Yale University School of Art. A great place to get an MFA from. Her work examines contemporary female identity through staged and directed photographs and videos. And if you're not familiar, you should go see it on her website, which I'm guessing is danahoey.com.
It is.
That's HOEYDANA. Michael Slaby, to her left, is just amazing. He helped the Obama for America campaign as Chief Integration and Innovation Officer 2012, where he oversaw all the technology and analytics, and as Deputy Digital Director for Chief Technology Officer in 2008. You were the guy in charge of all the online presence of the Obama campaign, really, in short. And Allison Chawla, our own hostess right here on Radio Free Rhinecliff, holds a master's degree in social work from Fordham University Lincoln Center and a life coaching certification from the Life Purpose Institute in San Diego. Before obtaining a master's degree, she mastered certifications in Reiki, energy healing, meditation, and meridian tapping for anxiety.
Yeah.
And what an impressive group. And I'll say one more thing and then I'll shut up. Years a while ago, I heard that Dana was going back to college to study religious studies or at Harvard Divinity School.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, that's so cool. You know, here she is. She's like 40 years old or something, which is like midlife by our
40.
actuarial guess. And then I heard that Michael was doing the same thing at the Union Theological Seminary down there in New York City, which is a gorgeous place.
Indeed.
And then I heard that Allison is doing the same thing also at Harvard. And you all are, aptly described as midlife. And you've all had other careers, which I just sort of cited here. And each of you decided, oh, I'm going to go to divinity school. What the hell? Anybody? I'm Dane. I'm looking at you.
Would you like to know why? As I was telling Michael before we began, I went to divinity school so that I could lord it over other people as a morally superior individual.
Lord being the action verb there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'll just tell you briefly. You know, Norm, as a visual artist, you're used to following your intuition, right? And that comes in different forms. And I was seated at Thanksgiving the year before I went, and I heard a sort of inner voice that said, go to divinity school and become a hospital chaplain. So that's what I'm doing.
Just
very simple, short story. Yeah.
Spectacular. Okay, next, Michael.
My story is not as simple or linear. I found my way to studying at Union after sort of a long search that really sort of started after the 2016 election cycle, where I, like a lot of people, were sort of dumbfounded by what had happened, sort of was doing a lot of thinking and exploration about like, what is going on in this country? What is going on in the Democratic Party? And that second question in particular sort of led me to this slow turn toward why is it that we believe what we believe on the left? Why is the moral foundation of liberalism feel so fragile? Why are we sort of so stuck in these sort of like, well, obviously arguments? And that sort of very slowly took me to studying in a bunch of different places, exploring and spending time with a lot of different kind of people, and eventually to Union as a place to study moral philosophy and social justice, because what I ultimately was looking for was a moral conversation about community.
Okay.
And I couldn't find it anywhere else. But It took me a while. That was 2016, end of 2016. And I just started studying at Union last year. So it took a minute.
Amazing. Allison?
Hi. Well, I would say that my foundation for all of the healing work and healing arts that I have gone into started with a spiritual interest. And I was just a very intuitive and spiritual kid. So honestly, even the reason that I went and got a master's at Fordham was because I wanted to enhance the practice that I was already involved in. And over the pandemic, I found myself wanting more, not only for people that I treat, but for myself. And I thought that that would come through a PhD in social work or possibly psychology. And then Dana and I were talking one day, and she said, "What the hell are you doing? Why aren't you applying to divinity school? This is where you are supposed to be." And so I did.
Okay. Well,
Busybody, Dana.
Wow.
what's the matter with a master's in social work for accomplishing
Oh,
what you
it's
wanted to
not.
do?
It's thank you.
What-
It's wonderful, but I don't know. I just feel like there's always room to grow and there's always space for more. And I knew for years that I did want to do another program, but I just was not sure what it was. And over the last few years, I have found that people have really opened up to things that they didn't believe in the past. And so to be able to get this education, to share it with other people, to apply it to a practice, and just to help myself evolve as well seemed like such a gift.
Right. And Dana, what made you say that to her? Like, what the hell you thinking? You should go to divinity school.
I said it because I feel like this is me being, as I said, a busybody, so pardon me, but I feel like Allison has this amazing, big, magnetic, glorious, performative personality that should be used in an active way. And I feel like a larger moral conversation, as you were saying, Michael, is apt. And so working beyond the individual therapist and client relationship to being more of a public figure in a fuller way that musters all her amazing spiritual skills seemed to make sense to me.
It's
So
very kind. Thank
So
you, Dana.
sweet. And is that where you're going, Allison? Like a
Yes.
public figure?
Oh, and I don't know. I mean, I was fortunate and blessed to get some press over the pandemic. That is not the goal for me at all. If that were to happen and it felt right, sure. But I mean, for me, it's more about wanting to indulge more in the spiritual and the cultural elements of what the program offers because it
Right.
resonates so deeply. And I just feel like I'm with my people, I'm speaking my language, and I'm doing what I think I'm here, what I'm meant
Right.
to be doing.
But if you're dedicated to helping people and you can help more people have a larger soapbox like Pema Chodron
Right.
or the Dalai Lama or whoever, then that certainly would
Well,
be.
that's very kind to even put that
We
that
need to
name in the
teach
same
Norm about
sentence.
managing expectations.
no pressure, no pressure.
Yeah, come on,
Oh
get
boy,
to it.
I'm starting to sweat already. But you
But-
know, it's also I'm not a visual artist, but I've always been a very creative person, and so I was seeking more creativity as a venue to help people heal and recover. And I was really pleasantly surprised to find out that Harvard is incredibly creative and prolific and progressive.
Right.
And I feel like I'm creating, over the summer when I did the condensed program, I felt like I was generating art as a form of divinity.
Explain.
Well, it's just that there's so many different incredible stories and cultures and backgrounds, and storytelling and coming together as a community is a form of evolution and a form of healing and growing. And so I wasn't generating paintings or pictures, but I felt like there was there was a creative wave that moved through the program throughout the entire week. So it was like a performative.
Right. Dana,
element.
you are a visual artist and you talk about your art sort of being in service of others.
Mm-hmm.
So was there some part of you that thought, oh, this will be a bigger soapbox?
I love what Allison said about the creative wave. I'm actually finding it a bit tricky to navigate my art and divinity school because I have, as I'm sure you do too, very kind of persnickety standards for arts, having taught for decades, at a grad school level. So I don't know how the two things are going to come together, but I will say I've tried to force art to be a political and ethical form for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I have other interests too, but I had to force that, and I kept trying to find ways to make it practical. Like I offered self-defense classes at the Detroit Museum of Contemporary Art. I did a live ladies fight. Like I've done various sort of social practice events to make it be ethical, like your work. But
Mhm.
I just really wanted applied, practical, ethical work. So I don't know how that will marry with art yet. We'll see. I'm in the learning process, and it's sort of like it's a 3-year program and a kind of breakdown process right now.
And how far into this 3-year program are you?
I have done 1 year.
And at the end, you'll have a master's of divinity?
Yes.
Michael, are you in a degree program or
No, I'm just I'm in a certificate program.
Okay.
It's an advanced certificate in social justice.
Okay. Sounds amazing. Allison?
I'm aiming for the master's. I started with the certificate program and then more or less was invited and encouraged to apply further. And so I'm going to find a way, even with small children, to get a master's.
Right. And Mike, when you said your path into this was through politics,
Yeah.
and wondering why, I'm going to paraphrase here horribly, I'm sure, sort of the moral platform of the liberals was so shaky and ill-defined, and however you put it. Is this helping you to get to where you wanted to go?
We'll see. I think the answer is yes. Like, I feel similar to the way Allison just expressed her experience with my people and in a different conversation than anyone I've been in before, particularly
Right.
about sort of the nature of community and social contract, the nature of the nature of our human interdependence, our connection to nature and natural systems, and our sort of like defining characteristic as spiritual beings is something that I think the secularization of the left has left a lot of people feeling left out of the left and the Democratic Party, despite most people believing in some form. There's sort of lots and lots of data about more people not affiliating with religion and sort of falling into the spiritual but not religious category, and sort of seeking and looking for meaning beyond human experience, and finding ways to talk about that with clarity and conviction that help us understand like why we need each other and why community matters and why civic life matters. I think the boundaries we tend to draw between these categories are pretty artificial,
Right.
and are often unhelpful. And that when we look back further in time, what we see is that sort of people lived in community governed by traditions that were a combination of spiritual practice and community rules and a bunch of other things that sort of amounted to a way of life, but no one would have used the term government or religion, or right, those categories came later.
Right.
And they don't always serve us well. And so what I'm finding in sort of thinking about sort of the next era of Democratic Party, next era of humanity, is sort of thinking differently about our social contract is actually made easier by starting with the reality that we are spiritual beings first, and allows us to think differently about sort of our relationship to the natural world and natural systems as a starting point, rather than like way downstream for like stacked on top of a bunch of like pretty stale assumptions about civilization.
Right. Okay, that was a fucking amazing answer.
I know, right?
But
I'm like, I'm
you're
still
dismissed.
processing that.
Thanks for coming in. Everybody else has to stay.
Is it okay if I ask
Yeah,
Michael a question?
everybody jump in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yes, that was totally amazing. And I have this sort of gripe or intuition, which is on the left. I feel like the major rift along the left is along churched or unchurched lines. And that also can fall along racial lines, too. I was at a political march in Hudson, and there was a black minister there, and a white marcher was condescending to her, and I just saw the whole thing play out, and I feel like I see it play out everywhere, and it's so destructive, and so I can fix that.
I think what you're seeing play out there is like a dismissiveness
Yes.
that shows up in urban liberal communities that is not helpful, and creates a lot of resentment inside the sort of broader democratic and liberal communities, and then unnecessarily exacerbates conflicts between like left and right, and sort of anyone and anyone else, right? The approaching other people as if they don't matter is an incredibly cruel way to start a conversation. And it's very hard to recover from. If we really want to figure out how to live together, if I start with, you don't really matter and the future isn't really for you, there's not very far for our conversation to go. And so getting more humble about sort of what we share and what we all need as humans, and some of these like what feel like more fundamental and take less of the abstractions of left and right and Republican and Democrat as givens, even though so much of our systemic inertia and media and sort of exacerbates those polarizations and those institutional failures. My first book was about that pressure, the pressure of media and technology on civic life. And I think what is true right now is that we tend to interpret the dysfunction and the cracks we're seeing in social and civic institutions as signs of collapse. I think we might be better off interpreting those things as signs of systems finally moving and
I love the optimism
in
there.
ways that they haven't
Yeah.
moved in a long, long time.
Right.
Well, you know,
And-
they say that the light can't get in unless there is a crack. So, and I always say that to people when they say, I feel like I'm breaking, I feel like I'm cracking. I say, well, good, because
Right.
now the old system can slip away and now the light can get in.
Can you play a
But
little
the-
Leonard Cohen?
Yeah. But the you don't matter thing is sort of a deeply seated sort of emotional response that people have to each other. You know, it's a symptom of the polarization.
Mhm.
But it's
And these
also a
emotional
symptom of a
things are-
zero-sum mentality and a scarcity mentality and a bunch of other things that we've inherited that aren't necessarily true. Like that that there's not enough room in the future for everyone is a narrative choice.
Right.
Like we live in an era of like unbelievable
Who
abundance.
benefits from that narrative?
People in power, the people who sort of control the current systems,
Right.
The sort of unequal, like pursuing like an unequal, unjust economy, and justifying its sort of perpetuation without actually thinking about transformation, right? Like one of the sort of defining characteristics.
Well, the people in power don't want transformation, right?
Well, one of I think the defining characteristics of like civilization, capital C, and I mean that kind of pejoratively, is its capacity to sort of like swallow and undermine anything that might challenge it as a like minor feature of or disregard it as uncivilized. The kind of examples I mean by this is in politics, as you see things like universal basic income or wealth taxes show up as these quote unquote transformative economic policies. And the problem with them is they're not actually, I'm for making cruel systems less cruel. If we can ameliorate cruelty in our institutions, we should. And we shouldn't pretend that making it slightly more expensive to be a billionaire douchebag is transformation. It may be worth doing, although I think executing on a wealth tax is incredibly complicated for lots and lots of reasons. It is very, very hard to do. And it's not as much money as we think it is. However, the intention is fine with me, but calling it transformation is the way civilization holds on to itself and keeps perpetuating the inequality by saying, okay, yeah, sure, we'll do this transformation and we'll make it this much more expensive and we're just going to keep doing what we're doing
Yeah.
and not actually reshape the way we distribute assets, the way we are responsible for each other, the kinds of things that we think about relative to things like mutual aid, which are concepts that lend themselves more toward equilibrium, which is a concept that doesn't have a role in neoliberal capitalist.
So what have you found in your religious studies that made you think, oh, wow, this is it, that might help affect change on a secular level? Which sounds like your goal of going back to school there.
One is sort of like getting more comfortable with the porousness of the boundary between the secular and the religious.
Mm-hmm.
And the first class I took at Union was with a professor named John Tatamanel, and it was about the role of religion itself in society and when it
Right.
emerged, like the concept that we sitting here in 2023 hold in our heads of the idea of religion is like both a spiritual category, but also like an anthropological, institutional category. Like when did that emerge and why and to what end and what purpose?
Right.
And the reality is that like I was saying before about sort of tradition and is an older way of seeing how communities governed sort of the combination of rules and living and ceremony and all these other pieces in ways that didn't have these like firm boundaries between secular and religious.
Right.
That concept emerged pretty concurrent with the emergence of the nation state.
Okay.
Because what we wanted was to be able to, we humans wanted to be able to secularize what the sort of philosophy that was governing society. And in order to create a hierarchy, you needed to put the spiritual into a category that you could say was subservient to the state. So now we have secular state and subservient because it's personal only. It's not communal. It's not part of how we govern. It's
individual.
It's individualized in a way that very few traditions were before that.
Right.
And just that the eye-opening of this as a construct and as a, so much of what we rely on in modern life, or we take as givens in modern life, are stories that we have agreed to over time.
Right.
And a lot of them feel inevitable because we agreed to them like a long time ago, but aren't. And that they are not inevitable is what gives me hope about changing the conversation we're having about what we think is required and what is in fact inevitable about the future.
Right. Now, Allison, you talked about stories. Do you have an idea on what new stories could be told to sort of bring communities together in a secular way? It would accomplish these goals of creating a fabulous world.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I think, I'm going to just sort of go back to how Michael mentioned the divisiveness, that the egos over time have gotten in the way. And that's why we think we're saying things so differently. And we think that our religious beliefs or our spiritual beliefs are so different, and it has become divisive. But if we are to recognize together that we're all sort of looking for the same thing, we all want peace, we all want safety, we all want to feel we're going to be forgiven, accepted. If we could find ways to take all of those elements that do exist in all of the different religions and all of the different cultures and bring them together and start finding the common ground.
Right.
Versus why my idea of spiritualism is better, why you think your God is the only God versus the God that I believe in.
Right.
And just come together and say, like, well, we're saying the same things. We have found different names for them. Over time, we have found different practices. I think that if we could bring those, commonalities together, that would be, bring people together and also enhance spiritualism and what divinity and religion is really designed for.
Right.
Because it causes war and it's supposed to create peace.
Okay. Fabulous. So do you all believe in God?
Yeah.
Yes, 10
but I don't use
seconds.
that word.
I believe, I say the universe,
Right.
I believe in a higher power. I believe there's something going on beyond myself, beyond the physical world that I'm in. I believe in the afterlife.
Right.
But I don't know that my God or what I, refer to as my belief system is really what is out there. It's just what resonates with me.
Okay. Michael?
That's a really great answer, actually.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you
I
can
was
just
gonna
say like ibid
ditto.
or opposite or
Okay,
ditto,
good
yeah.
night now.
Yeah, seriously. I was going to say I do, but I don't use that word. Like, I do believe in a divine source of power and inspiration, but I don't use the word God.
Uh-huh. Dana?
Well,
you laughed at the question.
Yeah, because it's such a, we're talking about politics and religion. It's just like such mayhem. But
I love the word mayhem too, by the way.
So I did believe in a sort of almost transactional God for 30 years. And then I had I learned this word theodicy, which means spiritual crisis. And I
Okay.
had a spiritual crisis over the course of 5 or 6 years of hard times, which many people go through. It's kind of a classic situation. So one of the reasons that I'm in Divinity School, apart from this calling that I had, was that I needed to find new systems of meaning and expand upon my current systems of meaning. And with that, I have an interest in, I'm so happy that Michael and Allison are able to think on these larger platforms, because I'm thinking very small. I'm thinking I want to be in the liminal space with someone in a hospital room or
Right.
somewhere else, help them find meaning, whether that be through a Christian God, through Allah, through an indigenous great creator, through, any kind of Haitian spirit, the
Right.
the Jed in Haiti, any kind of cool guide that they might need. So
Uh-huh.
that's my mission. So my tendency is to believe in nothing, so I just try to believe in everything.
Okay. Which seems kind of like close in a way. I'm not quite wrapping my mind around that you believe in all of them and therefore not just one of them. And so it's everything.
Well, belief is an act of will.
An act of what?
An act of will that
Okay.
encompasses doubt, which I have lots of doubt.
Okay.
And I don't think any person with faith doesn't have doubt. I mean, you can find great texts about this subject. So for myself, I do feel the need to affiliate to a formal tradition. So I'm after years of being a professor, I'm a research assistant this summer, and I'm researching Buddhism, and I'm learning the different traditions. So it seems to be there are, of course, deities in Buddhism, but
So that's the formal tradition?
yeah,
Is
it might be
academia?
a path through. It might be my path through. No, not
Right.
academia. No.
Oh, okay.
No, it might be my path through theodicy.
And when your previous belief in a God, where did that come from?
That was like a survival mechanism and a coping mechanism that I got when I was about 25 to just deal with nervous conditions that I had.
Uh-huh.
I was taught by a mentor how to sort of take my fears and anxieties and problems and turn them over to some unknown higher power. And I somehow developed a Santa Claus style one. I don't know how I did it. And it was quite a magical one. And
That's
then
great.
that no longer worked at a certain point.
Right.
Mhm.
And so I want to ask, I mean, was it part of a sobriety
Yes.
thing? Okay.
Mhm.
So that's wonderful. You turned it over to higher power, and this has worked for you by and large,
Mhm.
the
But
Santa Claus.
let me just say, you can be sober and not believe in God, though.
Sure.
Atheists are a big,
But-
wonderful part of the community. But
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I got lots of friends in AA,
Mhm.
and the God belief is a huge part of that for all of them. And it sounds
Yeah.
like a big part for the program as well.
It can be a barrier for people, though, too, because they're
Yeah.
like, ew,
Yeah.
you can do it without it.
And so now you believe in all of them. And let me ask about, you said ministering in a liminal space to people,
Mhm.
which is your goal to come out of this and be a hospital chaplain.
Yeah, that's the idea. I'm going to be trained next year at Beverly Hospital in Massachusetts. So if I'm any good at it, I'll do it. I know I'm calm in a crisis, and I know that I'm not good for what Allison does, which is long-term treatment. I just can't do it. But I like that short-term crisis management. I think I'm good. I couldn't be a movie producer. That's crisis management too. But I can do.
Right.
I know I'm fine in these types of situations where people have lost their sense of meaning. It's just a place that I'm able to exist comfortably.
And have you done that as an amateur in your past?
Yeah.
And-
My best friend's child had cancer twice and ultimately died. So I was there for a lot of that.
Right. And answering tough questions. How old was the child? And I'm sorry to hear that.
He had cancer at 2. His name
Ugh.
was Leaf Greening Hamlin. And then he had a secondary cancer, which killed him at 8.
Egads.
Mhm.
And so
Sweet boy.
you're ministering to him and I'm guessing his
Not
broader
so much
family.
him. Not so much him. And I wasn't ministering. I was just a stunned witness to my friend Mary Greening.
Okay.
Mary C. Greening.
A stunned witness, but providing some kind of comfort in some way. I mean, this was the example of sort of why you thought you might want to do this ministering.
Well, I noticed that chaplaincy is being a witness. And I noticed that I was able to do that. Not that I said anything special or had any particular tools. I know my existing tools were failing me in that situation. There is no cure for the death of a child. It's
Right.
an awful, awful thing, but
Yeah.
barbaric loss that cannot be sort of redeemed in any way. But I noticed that I was able to be there, and for whatever reason, not everyone likes it. Understandably, not everyone. I don't like it, but I know I can do it. And so chaplaincy is a formal training for how to be a witness for someone and how to be a presence. And in fact, Mary's best experiences with chaplains were with people who said nothing, made no promises, no prayers. No, if you do this, he will live. None of that kind of stuff. Just like, we will be with you. We know there is suffering.
They
We will
listen
be with
and-
you. You are not alone in this suffering.
So
We'll
don't
help you
turn
bear
away.
it. Mhm.
Right. That's just amazing. That's so beautiful. And so I got to ask this, and I'll ask all y'all, what happens after we die?
Mhm.
Yeah, I know.
Allison knows.
Everybody's
Yeah,
laughing
Allison
and
knows.
smiling. It's like, yeah, let's start with you, Dana.
Oh, me?
Yeah, sure.
Of course I don't know. Of
Yeah.
course I don't know. My mom just died, and a crow came and talked to me, and my brother said, "Oh," my brother, who's incredibly secular, said, "Oh, that was Mom." So you never know.
Right.
Mhm.
Michael.
I believe we have contact with ancestors through all kinds of means and for all kinds of time if we're open to them. Does that mean afterlife? I don't know.
And what is that contact like? What form does that
It
take?
can be messages, it can be visits, it can
A
be
crow
dreams, it can be, there are lots of mechanisms by which we can communicate with the spirit world.
And are they coming from us, like seeing the crow and saying, "Oh, I see that as a symbol," or is it that the crow actually is a symbol come to us? Is it something we ascribe meaning to, or it has inherent meaning?
I think both happen. I think
Right.
there are times when we are desperate for meaning, where we craft an experience that may not be happening,
Right.
out of desperation. The spiritual desperation that Dana talked about is something that I think is very endemic in American culture right now.
Right.
And I think there's a distinction between sort of the creative experience of sort of a generative experience that's coming from us versus a perceived experience that is happening to us or around us, and we generally know the difference. Sometimes we need guides to help us interpret. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's usually, my experience is that interpretation is best done with a guide.
Yeah.
That doing that yourself is pretty risky.
Right. And do you feel as if you're a guide, Allison? I mean, that's sort of a job description for.
I do channeling and mediumship. So
Oh, you do?
yes,
Oh,
I did
nice.
start. I was sort of born. I was like the little kid
So you
saying,
really are a guide.
yeah, thank you, maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I call myself more of a translator, because like Michael was just about to say, you don't want to do something like that by yourself because the emotions are so heavily involved that you can either trick yourself into believing something or thinking you're feeling something or rely upon something that's just creating comfort. So it's best to have a guide with you. But again, I kind of call myself more of a translator or like a communicator because, and again, I agree with everything that the both of them just said. I believe in everything. You know, I've met people of different religions and cultures, and they've said, if you do this, it's going to protect you. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go do it now, right now. So I'm open to everything. But I do believe, obviously, in the afterlife because I've had enough experiences of messages that have come through that have been very clear for people. I've done it for Dana before. She's firsthand experienced.
Done what?
Mediumship and channeling of people that have passed.
Please.
Yes.
Wow.
The little boy that we were just talking about.
So how did that work? I'd love to hear from both of you.
Well, I also just want to finish by saying,
Oh, yeah.
even though I do this and I was born doing this, I still don't know what's going on. Like I don't know what's going to happen when I die, but I will. There's something there. There's something going on. There is an ability to communicate. I also believe in the journey of the soul, that if your soul has to work through something, it has multiple chances in life where it will be reincarnated and it will come back to work out whatever it may be. And that you tend to end up in the same circle of souls because there is this sort of divine intervention that needs to occur in order for an evolution to happen. I don't believe human beings can be enlightened. I think that souls can be enlightened and that you do work through what I was just talking about to get to that place.
Interesting.
Yes.
But human beings can help their souls.
Well, and that's why we're here. That's part of the reason why I think we're here, is that there is a sort of a mission that needs to be accomplished or resolved, if you will.
Okay.
And if it doesn't get resolved in this lifetime, you come back and you keep doing it in the next until it's resolved.
Okay. Where do new souls come from?
That's a great question. That's one of those things that I don't know.
Right.
But it's funny because, you know, like people will say, wow, that's an old soul. Even people that aren't believers, they're like, whoa, that kid is an old soul. Or then that kid's a new soul.
Right.
You know, so I don't know where they come from.
Right. Yeah. And for the record, I'm skeptical, super skeptical, agnostic,
Skepticism
atheist,
is good.
whatever. But neither do I say no. None of this could exist,
right?
Because how could you? How
can you know? Right. And
So-
again, I just, you know, I was that quirky kid in the middle of the night, like, oh, so and so just came and spoke to me, and my parents would be like, go back to bed, and then the next morning they'd be like, oh, so and so died yesterday. How did you know that? It's like, well, I don't know. He just kind of came in the room and told me.
To connect these dots and realize, oh wow, I've got some kind of power here.
Yeah, I don't know if I call it a power, maybe sort of a blessing or a gift,
Right.
an ability. And
So if you wouldn't mind discussing, and if you don't want to, if it's too personal, whatever, just say
No, it's fine.
next
I'll let
question.
Dana. She can share her. You can share. The
I'd love to hear about
experience.
the channeling that you all
Sure.
did.
Sure. Can I preface it by
Yeah.
saying that living with faith and skepticism and doubt means that I live with contradiction in a way that I'm very comfortable with as an artist,
Right.
right? And Zen Buddhists are very comfortable with contradiction too. It's their path to spirituality. So
Yeah.
it's possible that this happened. It's possible that I wanted it to happen. It's possible that I made it all up and Allison didn't even text me. Like I do, but what happened was, she got a visitation from Leaf, who was a small red-haired boy. He had long red hair. He had a limp from his 2-year-old training. She saw the limp without knowing that. He ran around her and had a message for me regarding his mother. So that's what happened there.
And I remember now that you're saying it, because again, when I'm translating or channeling, it's not my information. So a lot of the time after the fact, I will forget. I will say, like, I don't remember what I said because it wasn't it was as if someone was saying, can you tell her this or can you tell him this?
Right.
So it's not information that was inside of me. But I'd remember this particular child was like running in circles. And I said, and he was like limping on one side. And I said, there is this boy and he's running circles. And there's something very significant about the running circles and the limp that you will know who I'm talking about. So it's stuff like that happens.
And what was the message?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
That he was okay and very worried about his mom.
Not to abandon Mary.
The mom.
For me as a friend, too. Not to abandon her.
Right. I love that. That's so sweet. And, I'm at a loss for words. I mean, that you would see that, and I trust you and I believe you. It was often the skeptic in me is like,
you don't have to. Most people think I'm nuts, and that's fine.
Well, but often the skeptic in me is like, oh, well, anybody could look that up on the internet. You get information somehow and you play it back. But I don't think that about you. I would be
Thanks.
surprised. And so I tend to believe all of that. And so it's a little goosebumpy, this connection.
I find it easy to think that there are levels of intuition, too.
Right.
Some people pay attention more carefully, and there's, like any skill, there's levels to it. So I just feel like Allison has a particularly tuned
Right.
hypersensitivity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you grow up and your parents are like, oh, my God, why did you dream of that because she just passed away, then you would
Yeah.
start to get tuned into that blessing.
Yeah. And it's, when I say I see it, I don't literally see it. It's more like, it's like I call it like a download. Like all of a sudden the information shows me what it's wanting me to see, like a mind's eye thing. I don't actually visually I'm like, look, don't you see him? Do you see that?
Right.
It's not like that.
But in your mind's eye, I mean, a long red hair is pretty specific.
Yeah, I get some pretty specific details.
And are you somehow seeing it or just sort of feeling the description or?
It's
Inside
like
your
a
head.
download. It's
Uh-huh.
like all of a sudden I have this story in my head that I've never heard, that I've never seen, that I know nothing about, and I know that it's not for me and I'm supposed to tell it to the person.
Right. Okay. So now with this blessing,
I will wake you up in the middle of the night tonight, Norm.
Please do. Anytime, text
I will
away.
ride my bike over and knock on the door.
Yeah,
I have a
good.
message.
I have to tell you something.
So now you're in divinity school with this blessing.
hmm
And are there classes there that talk about this and how to, build that muscle, if you will?
I haven't taken a class like that yet, but this was a big part of my application. I mentioned this because this is who I am, and I wanted them to know that this is part of the reason that I wanted to participate. But channeling and mediumship, if you look into history of most religions and churches, is an ancient skill and an ancient way of communicating and has been around for centuries. It's been around since the beginning of time. And it's a language. It's like if you're born in a bilingual house, you know how to speak these two languages. So people
Right.
see you as an adult and they're like, oh, how'd you learn how to speak that? Like, well, I grew up that way. So this is a language that I think we all have. And especially if you watch infants and children and the way that they behave and the way that they interpret the energy around them, it's something that's in us. It's just like anything else. If you don't use it, you lose it.
And was there a lot of religion in your house growing up? Were your folks religious?
No, my mother was like you. She was more agnostic,
Uh-huh.
atheist. My father was Irish Catholic. They sent me to a Lutheran church.
Uh-huh.
That was also an opening in my which
Jersey
Dana.
Lutheran.
I was a Jersey Lutheran. No, they weren't. But my parents both knew I had something going on. I remember my father. I distinctly remember him saying, like, "You've got some kind of ESP. Protect it, but it's going to be useful one day."
Wow.
Yeah.
And did they push you in a direction where others might help you, build them up? That muscle?
No, I don't, and I don't think they knew how.
Right.
But when my mother got sick in my early teens, people just started popping up, and I knew that I had to
The
follow
student
them.
was ready and the master appeared.
But yeah, exactly.
Amazing. And Michael, did you grow up in a religious household?
I did. My mom is an Episcopalian, and I grew up going to church every Sunday. I was sang in the choir, was an acolyte, was confirmed,
Uh-huh.
but sort of never. It was a community that was really important to me. Like the youth group was really important to me. The people and the
Right.
friends were really important to me. It was something I did because it was the thing you do on Sundays. As I got into my teen years, I started to wonder where God was in the conversation, and I started to have, kind of like typical like uncertainty about the tradition I'd been handed that a lot of people go through,
Right.
and some people sort of go through that sort of moment of questioning and doubt and sort of decide to stay on the path, and some people set down the path that they were given and find a new one. I sort of feel like I was always seeking to some degree. Seeker is a sort of pretty comfortable posture for me.
Right.
And so I set down Christianity pretty early, but not sort of spirituality or the desire for meaning or a way to think about the world or humans that sort of felt bigger than the reasons I was getting for why things were happening.
Right. It's interesting. Your website, which I went to today, right in the landing page, it says, "Are you trying to understand how we got here and where we're going?" And it's mostly about leadership and politics and stuff because you do a lot of speaking. But it's very much
It's all one conversation. Like
Okay.
the topics and the vocabulary shifts a little depending on the audience and like I talk differently in like a CEO room than I do in like a spiritual ceremony, but the content and the sort of perspective is unchanged, which is, I think the questions you're asking about channeling and media, like asking Allison, I think we have access to all kinds of gifts that come from spirit that we can block or not, depending on our experience and what's going on with us and whether we're in a good relationship with spirit or not, or a good relationship with self or not. That can be creativity. It can be innovation. It can be channeling. It can be like there are a lot of our gifts come from out beyond us.
Right.
And when we are living in a good way with those things, like we use the gifts without friction, and things flow through us in a way that a lot of people can just often describe the concept of flow states. And there's lots and lots of writing about this in lots of different traditions.
Right.
And Rick Rubin, his new book, The Creative Act, talks about this constantly,
Right.
about the relationship to source. And that like when we
This
are
is the music producer, right?
Yeah.
He's famously spiritual.
Yeah. And his book is really wonderful, sort of musing about the nature of creativity as a gift that we all have access to, but we often get in our own way about, right? We get nervous that we aren't going to have another good idea. So we hold on to the idea that we just got rather than expressing it, use the gift. And so I think, to the question about like how we got here and where we're from, that can get shaped into a lot of different vocabularies. That can be an organizational conversation about the nature of a company. That can be a country. That can be a relationship. There is a lot of uncertainty that we are feeling and dysfunction we're feeling in society by having been struggling with sort of the requirements of civilization for a lot of generations.
Right. Which, and I loved what you said about getting rid of the friction that gets in the way of you exercising those gifts. And I guess society is imposing a lot of that friction. Dana, do you feel that you're doing the same thing, getting rid of some of the friction that's coming between you and this, for lack of a better word, spiritual world?
Do I? Yes. I mean, I just gave up martial arts after 15 years. I've done all kinds of
Oh,
changing
no.
right now. I know. Oh, no. I know.
Because for those who don't know, a lot of your art was about that.
Yes.
And a lot of it, and I love your art so much, was about
Thank you.
women in martial arts
Yeah.
and women's relationships to each other, sort of in these pictures. Is super evocative and rich stuff.
Thank you.
I just wanted to plug for a second.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. I'm looking for, I mean, I think a lot about generations, and so I'm quite interested to hear Michael speak about his sort of communicating to different people during the Obama campaign. I'll study you more and read more, because I have 2 young adult sons who are both super left-wing and super impatient, and watching them sort of, and there's an epidemic of sort of suicidality in their generation, and they both suffered a fair amount. And so like learning how to teach that generation to muster their energies in a productive way and live with the specter of ecological disaster and live with their sort of, strange economic prospects, all of these kinds of, the sense of impossibility, all these sort of difficult things. It's definitely an ongoing interest of mine. I don't know how to fix it, though.
And a tough sell.
Yeah.
But you have the kids. What are the things that you do? I mean, because when we talk amongst ourselves, it's like, yeah, the earth is burning. The political system is getting really grotesque. Late stage capitalism is even more grotesque. It's what do you say to these kids?
Well, I feel like my job is not to tell them how to live, because they're very good at devising ways to do that despite their fear. I feel like my job is more to care for and be responsible for my generation's sort of errors and blindnesses. So if I have a side issue or a social justice issue, it is a sort of what I alluded to earlier, the kind of arrogance and blindness of my demographic, which is the middle-aged, upper middle class white lady type situation. And that was my interest in my visual art too. So
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So you said you had a question for Michael or Allison.
I didn't have a question. Did you have a question, Dana?
I have lots of questions, but no, I
Well,
mean,
you three. I mean, this was the genesis in my mind was that you all would have a great conversation. I would just watch. That there would be so much to talk about between yourself, and hopefully it'll survive sort of tonight's hour in this booth, because it is fascinating that each of you has gone down this path.
Yeah.
they're both social justice programs, Union and Harvard, in a way, because then people are more comfortable thinking about them that way because it sounds more secular too. So, but Union is famously social justice. They were the sort of the most radical divinity school historically, and Harvard's kind of
and very interfaith, very diverse, which is part of what drew me to it. Both of those,
for sure.
The sort of focus on interreligious engagement and interfaith. It is a theological seminary. It comes from a Christian ecumenical tradition, but it's a very interfaith, very diverse community, which was part of what drew me there.
now I want to compete. Harvard has 41 different religions.
Oh,
I'm going to stay out of it.
No.
Ding, ding, ding.
Harvard has, I looked at the professors and they're just, I mean, it's everything. They cover all the bases.
You can learn Pali, I'm not. You can learn ancient Greek, I'm not.
Yeah. And so what classes have each of you had so far that's just been like, wow, blowing my mind. This is such an advancement in the path you were on, or introduction to a new path, or whatever, just blown your mind?
Well, I started with the condensed summer session, and what blew my mind was the diversity. I thought, okay, I'm going to go in there and we're going to study like the history of religion. This is going to be very heavily like theology based. And the first day we were talking about Buddhism, which is, I know Dana's on this path now, and it's something that I was very drawn to for my own healing and answers early in life. But I was just blown away by how much is incorporated in the program. I think anybody of any belief system could go and benefit from it, versus going there and like, now we're going to go to church, now we're going to pull out the Bible, and now we're going to get down on our knees and pray. It was nothing like that. It just felt like this family of seekers and, full of curiosity. And no one's beliefs were discriminated against, regardless of the diversity in the room. So that really was fantastic. Is fantastic.
Michael, any classes that just really were standouts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this part-time, so I've only taken a few classes. I took a class in the history of American spirituality and environmentalism that was sort of a fascinating sort of journey through like sort of American sort of naturalist and romantic culture and its relationship to spirituality and environmental justice. I took a class last semester that was about the role of religion in the current American crisis, which was very aligned with sort of the conversation I was searching for about how much the sort of dysfunction and frustration and polarization we see has a religiosity to it that we tend to discount, and to our like great strategic downfall, that, you know, we are not going to confront sort of a sort of pervasive sense of this having been dismissed, and a sense of futurelessness, and right or wrong, a sense of being aggrieved in communities that are not being trod on, by convincing them of the rational value of President Biden's trade policy. Like, it's just not a rational conversation. It's an emotional conversation.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual conversation. And if we look at the state of the Republican Party, Trumpism bears a lot more similarity in terms of how it operates, how he operates, how his diehard supporters operate. It's much closer to a religion than it is to a political party.
Well, they're appealing. The Republicans have always been so much better at appealing to the emotional parts of a voter than the Democrats, who are like, oh, look at this policy. Here's what makes sense, which is an appeal to the intellect. And the emotional appeal always wins. I mean, I worked in advertising for years. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And yet the Democrats over and over don't seem to remember that or put it into any meaningful action.
I think we often take the thing that my experience on the left is that we often take our values and beliefs as givens in conversations instead of stating them with conviction. And it gets us in trouble constantly. We start with these sort of sentences that sound like, well, obviously we need to make sure everyone has healthcare. So let's do national healthcare. It's like, actually, that first part of the sentence, the well, obviously part, is where the whole argument is. Because the moral principle there is that your health matters to my health.
Right.
And that I care about your health as much as I care about my health. And therefore am willing to make sacrifices to ensure that you are healthy. And that's not a given. That is not universally shared. That is an argument we need to have and win in order to convince people that then there's a whole question about how to ensure that you're healthy. And then there's a whole nother question about like markets versus public systems and a bunch of other stuff, which is markets don't provide public goods. And so having a moral conversation about a covenant and then ensuring that we can deliver on the covenant is a pretty strong moral argument for a much larger social sort of set of social services that actually support human thriving,
Right.
and function much more like a launch pad for people than a pejorative social safety net, which is a term popularized by Reagan.
Right.
I would say that it's not so much an argument that we need to have. I agree that we need to advance some moral covenant and come to an agreement on it. But I think we need new left-wing gurus, which is where I think you and Allison come into play. I have you all set up.
Thank
as
you.
my
I know.
new gurus.
I should just ask you what I should do with this.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I pray you get back into politics. I mean, you're so smart. It makes so much sense. And you're singing my song, but in a voice I love. And I hope you can bring this new learning into helping the Democrats sell what, in my mind, is always a much more Christian bill of goods than what the Republicans are trying to sell.
Says the agnostic.
Yeah.
I was raised Christian. You know, I
what
turned my back
kind?
at like 17.
What kind?
Methodist, mostly Presbyterian before that. But, you know, the super chill sect of Christianity.
But you're a very moral person.
You know,
Your
my
work is
my
totally
church was
ethical.
really service oriented,
Yeah.
and I loved that.
hmm
And as soon as I found footing as an adult, I started looking for ways to do that.
Mhm.
But then the mystical end of it, I was like, yeah, I don't know.
No thanks.
I
Yeah.
didn't accept Jesus as my savior.
I don't like
which
that dotted line thing you have to do.
oh yeah,
Sign here
well,
immediately. Did
yeah,
you agree?
well,
Yeah.
many people do, and
Yeah.
they, my experience, cousins and people, they call themselves a Christian. I'm like, I can't. If that's what it is, I can't.
Mhm.
But I do try to walk that walk.
Mhm.
I can. So you all do you have sort of spiritual heroes? I mentioned Pema Chodron and the Dalai Lama, and who's the Stendhal Rast? What's that guy's name? There's lots of religious. Or somebody mentioned the environment. Emerson. Are there people who you looked up to, or currently look up to in the religious political world?
I definitely was very much devoted to the Dalai Lama since I was a teenager. But these days, I really find inspiration from spirituality in just anyone, even on the street, doing something kind. It
Oh.
doesn't have to be like a huge guru for me to think like, oh God, there's goodness, there's spirituality. Like,
Right.
just someone, somebody drops a wallet, someone picks it up and runs it over to them, or somebody rescues an animal, or someone holds a door.
So beautiful.
I just think like, wow, look at that. Like it is here, it exists. And I think a big problem for some people is that they assume they need to select or resonate with one particular guru, and it's actually all around. It's around us all of the time. This in itself feels like a spiritual moment to me, being able to speak to you with these two people and have these two producers here, like
Right.
So I like the Dalai Lama, a lot of Buddhist figures, a lot of the Rinpoches in the Buddhist religion. But again, for me, it's become more about recognizing that they're all around.
Right. And that's a beautiful thing. And lots of religions are headed that direction to get you to the point where you're like, it's all around. We're all connected. It's all part of the same thing. I want to ask that question of each of you. Is there somebody who you have a guru, as Allison put it, or sort of a spiritual hero who you've come back to? Michael, honestly, Emerson.
I'm pretty allergic to guru-ishness
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
I think part of this has to do with the work that I've done in digital systems and modern media, that like our celebrity culture makes moral gurus tricky. And that's that doesn't mean that there aren't leaders and thinkers and philosophers that I love and respect, but guru is pretty like,
Yeah, it
like,
is scary.
that's a like red flag word for me.
All right. We have 45 seconds
I agree
left,
with
so I
that.
got to interrupt you
No!
and ask Dana, same question. Are there people you looked up to now or historically?
Did Marvin Gaye write What's Going On?
I think
Yes.
so.
So then he's my guru. That's the
Strong.
greatest
Great
song of all
answer.
time.
That's a great
I
answer.
wish we had it queued up. We could play that out. All right. Well, listen, the hour's flown by. I was so nervous talking to you all. I respect you all so much.
Oh,
I'm
thanks,
so
Norm.
grateful
You're so kind.
Thank
that
you
you
so
were
much.
here
Thank you for
to
creating
have
place.
this talk.
Such
And
a
I will
treat.
show up at your house at midnight, but I do want people to know that know me. I don't just channel, I ask permission. Just like I wouldn't peek in someone's windows, I wouldn't just channel for someone unless they wanted me to.
Thank you.
But tonight I will show up at your house.
Thank you. That's Allison Chawla,
Okay.
Michael Slaby, and Dana Hoey. Thank you all for being here. Everybody have a fabulous Friday night. Thanks for tuning in. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.